move them forward for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Iris. And thanks everyone for, this is Vonceil, for letting us, and Kenny McMahon, we're both part of the ODOT Natural Resources Program Monarch team, and we appreciate being able to present our case study to you guys today. Just a little bit of background. Our office was actually first introduced to the Monarch CCAA and the UIC ERC Rights of Way Working Group in July of 2018, after our environmental division engineer and our cultural natural resources director were attending Chris Gade's AASHTO Monarch CCA presentation in Spokane, Washington. As a matter of fact, they were so impressed with her presentation that while she was speaking, we got a pretty heated email from both of them asking why in the world we were not involved in the CCA effort. So while we're here today, we just wanted to thank Chris for all that extra work, but it's extra work that we have really enjoyed. Slide 2, please. So we recognized, like I said, that we were being given an immediate directive, and so our team started investigating what would really be required of our agency to participate in the agreement. Of course, to us, the benefits of the agreement in regulatory certainty, addressing threats to the species, and also addressing problems that we might see in our roadside vegetative management and opportunities within our management program were pretty clear. So we identified a set of what we believed were achievable conservation recommendations based on what was in the agreement. And we started internal discussions with our maintenance division on whether any of these practices were already part of our present on-the-ground strategies or where we could implement some of these strategies going forward to help with our enrollment in the CCAA. Next slide, please. So we kind of feel our approach has been very similar to what other agencies have been experiencing, not just DOTs, but even in the energy sector. And so when we started looking at our present practices and historical practices, we recognized that we had some assets in place that might help with implementation of broader habitat benefits, not just for monarchs, but for multiple species that our office is tasked with. So we realized one thing that we discovered is that we had a robust wildflower planting program, and it was ODOT's first landscape program that was started in 1976. And it was in full swing by the 90s, and it was really popular. So paper records, which is of course the unfortunate part of the story, paper records were only available from a kind of a roadside inventory done in 2014. But those records indicated that there was an estimated 2,200 acres of wildflower plantings in 586 sites statewide. So we tasked these paper records, and they have been mapped, and GIS locations were generated by our program's University of Oklahoma graduate assistant, whose thesis work is also involving a roadside suitability model for one of our 8 ODOT field districts. Our other opportunity that we realized, and this attractive beetle photo is for Chris Smith, as part of our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Federal Highways ODOT American Bearing Beetle Programmatic, our revegetation is one of our avoidance and minimization required measures. And that's required for all of ODOT construction and maintenance projects in 44 Oklahoma counties on the eastern part of the state. So in collaboration with the Oklahoma Natural Resources Conservation Service and Dr. Dennis Martin, who is a research specialist at Oklahoma State University, we worked on developing a native seed mix. We were originally tasked with developing this to use native plant material for erosion control, So we took a base model and we made that to where we felt like it would work in our 44 county, eastern 44 counties by adding or subtracting species for the revegetation program. And then when we started looking at the Monarch, we went back in and we did the research with local vendors, and we started adding in some pollinator species, specifically nectar and available milkweed species that we could find from vendors. So what we're hoping we have here is a multi-use native seed mix that we could apply to different scenarios as we needed on our land system. So next slide, please. So the other asset that we felt that we had was it was the Monarch joint venture. I believe it was started in 2015. And in 2016, ODOT signed on to the memorandum of agreement for the Monarch Highway, which was kind of like, it was a symbolic highway that ran through Missouri, Texas, Iowa, Kansas, and Minnesota, the I-35 corridor. And it's approximately 1,569 miles. And in that part of the corridor, all voluntary, again, in anticipation of a voluntary collaboration, our then ODOT maintenance engineer, Brad Mirth, began tasking the ODOT field divisions with practicing sustainable mowing techniques in the right-of-ways. And so those mowing techniques were kind of disseminated across all of our 8 districts. And at the time, they were excluding, of course, urban areas and safety zones. And so that was, again, something that we knew had been put in place, but it had only been put in place on the I-35 corridor. The other opportunity within this MOU was also that the ODOT Maintenance Division partnered with the Oklahoma State University to study the impacts of these different mowing regimes and schedules. And they created 25 research sites along that segment of I-35, and then they extended it onto State Highway 51 going into Stillwater, so that Oklahoma State University could also use that research plots as an educational opportunity. Most of these plots were about 50 feet wide by 360 feet long, and the information from those plots were sent to Monarch Joint Venture originally in 2016 to become part of their database. Next slide, please. Another aspect of that collaboration with the Oklahoma State University came through a state grant from ODOT's Office of Research and Implementation, their Planning and Research Work Program. And that's a big mouthful right there. This grant provided ongoing support, not just for the research on mowing and roadside management practices, but it was also a task. We created 2 task orders, and the other task order was to have practices that were specific to herbicide and pesticide applications and to continuing educational workshops for ODOT Maintenance Division licensed applicators. This program has really resulted in keeping staff current on the most recent herbicide applications, and it's managed to improve some of our IVM applications by developing spot spraying techniques, and we've even had one of our divisions purchase wiping machines to go after specifically Johnson grass rather than doing broadcast spraying. They're really starting to target some of these unwanted vegetation in the right-of-ways. And so actually there's one part of the slide that you'll see where the mowing regimes on those research plots. We did the four different mowing regimes, and we did discover that for Oklahoma, it was best to do that mowing in July when a lot of the milkweed had started blowing seed. And that allowed for our milkweed to have a second regrowth period for that final generation as they're coming back into the fall migration. So we felt like these partnerships were really giving us a lot of on-the-ground information that we could implement in a larger program that would work within the Monarch CCAA. Next slide, please. So, of course, we did have several challenges as we're ramping up for our CCAA application process. From my perspective, if I could pin one thing down, it was institutional memory. While we're developing a lot of, what we see as a real benefit from the CCAA and what we think that we can implement statewide in our land system, we had a lot of people retire. We had a lot of people move to the private sector, and we had a lot of changes in state government. So we kept plodding along and trying to develop, a way to show what kind of assets we had on the ground that was a really fast package that we could share with kind of the changing ground under our feet. And so from here, the middle map that you see here is basically our 8 divisions with our major highway systems running through it. And from that map, then we overlaid the Monarch Flyway as we knew. It probably, this is our best estimate of what we knew probably was coming through the state. And then on top of that, then we looked at what our graduate research assistant had done with wildflower plots, which is the top map. And then in June of 2020, we were also kind of offered some land areas. They completed the Oklahoma Interstate Rest and Parking Area study in June of 2020. And what the study was to see what exactly we needed to do with the rest areas that were throughout the state. And this included 12 rest areas, 16 paved and unpaved pullouts, 5 welcome centers on I-35 and I-40. And the result of that study was that they were going to decommission all of these areas except for the visitor center entry areas at the major highways. And in those areas, they actually have allowed us, at one of them, we've put in a pollinator garden, and we were discussing with the ones they are going to keep open to have other pollinator education areas. So with those areas, that was kind of our base ground. And so the next thing was really to start looking at what we wanted to enroll and what we wanted to adopt. And that was when the heavy lifting was punted to Kenny McMahon. And so I'm going to let him take over part of this presentation so he can show kind of what he did with the hard facts.
Hi all, I'm Kenny McMahon. I'm another biologist. I work with Vonceil. I have tried to do all of the background work that I could think of for the state of Oklahoma. And like Vonceil was saying, we have a lot of resources on hand for the state. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot with is the GIS of the state and the numbers and the stats. And so there's a GIS department within ODOT that has given us this total mowable acres number of 150,000 acres. And so every time I see that one, I get nervous about how we're going to enroll all of those acres. It seems like a huge number to me. So I've been finagling numbers and doing all sorts of things to try and figure out how we can best use our resources to get to those numbers as easily as possible. One of the things that I have learned in talking with some of our maintenance engineers is that they kind of think in terms of miles of roadway that they manage. So I've done some stats and seen that. So the miles of highway within our state that we need for adopted acres is just under 2,000 miles. And that's based on the total habitat acres that we have along those roadways and the habitat acres per mile based on the mowable width and the habitat width which is the mowable width minus the clear zones and shoulders and things like that. So in the state of Oklahoma, on average, we've got about 6 acres per mile of habitat acres that we want to manage for. And down below, we've got 2 pictures that Vonceil and I took this summer of former wildflower plots. On the left, you can see there's a historical marker, that's was a wildflower plot at one point, but that is mowed, obviously. So we need to do some work on that one. Whereas on the right, this is next to one of the freeways, I think I-40 in the state, and this is almost perfect. This is almost all big blue stem with lots of forbs and milkweed in the undergrowth of that big blue stem. In the back, there's a bit of Johnson grass that you kind of see as a fuzzy pink, but for the most part, this is a good site. And so before we go to the next slide, if you look at the state map there, the blue in the north center of the state, we're going to zoom in there and look at some things, just look at some things there. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So here, one of the maps that we have is a game type map of the state. And this has been really useful for us in figuring out where certain ecosystems are within the state. So in this division, I've pulled the highways that we are responsible for at ODOT and done a buffer around them using the game type map so that we can see kind of in general where the highways are that will be the easiest for us to rehab into pollinator stuff. So all of that tall grass prairie is probably going to be as good as possible for us to recreate or rehab habitat. And so some more statistical stuff, I did the same stuff within this division and for all of the divisions. So we've got 19,000 mowable acres, and when we break it down into divisions, the mowable miles, I think, starts to be a number that's a little bit more reasonable. So 257 miles over the course of this entire division seems more reasonable and is an easier sell to the maintenance managers. And so the next set of slides, I'm going to move through pretty quickly because they're just kind of displays for another tool that we have been using. We have been using the Roadside Suitability map modeler that they built at the U of M. And this is the other tool that I'm going to talk about that we have been trying to use to find the lowest hanging fruit for the simplest habitat. And so if you go to the next slide, please. So this is K County, the northernmost county in the division that we were just looking at. And you can you can see the highways, and these are the pixels that have been shoved out of the model that they created at U of M. And you can see that these north-south highways, I-35 over on the left is mostly blue, which is the best. And even with the highest average daily travel, because those rights of way are so wide, those are generally viewed as good potential for habitat for the monarchs. And if you go to the next slide, please. Here we're following I-35 south to the next county, and you can see it's still blue and still very good. And you can sort of see there's a town by US 64 and 164 just to the east of I-35, and that's where it gets more green and yellow, less suitable, and that sort of makes sense. It confirms what most of us knew anyways, but I-35 is still generally a very good, is very suitable for monarch habitat. And if you go to the next slide, please. Here, I-35 is kind of right in the middle of the county here, and there's a big town at State Highway 105, and that's about where the cross timber start and the tallgrass prairie fades away. And the cross timbers, if you don't know, is oak savanna, and so there's still a lot of suitable habitat in there for monarchs, but it is getting a little bit less suitable. And so if you go to the next slide, and so here, this is Oklahoma City, that big red circle right in the middle. And here's where we really see that the urban locations are not as suitable along the rights of way. But this isn't a perfect display map because these are 30-meter pixels, and so that's why they're kind of hard to see, and that's why there's all of this, the other roadways alongside the highways that kind of make everything muddled. But this was kind of the best way that I found I could show the roadside suitability to greater audiences that haven't been in and out of it constantly. So this is what I've got. These are the tools that I have been using to try and get the big picture for our state so that we can find the lowest hanging fruit as best as possible. And if you go to the next slide, this is the title slide from the model that I've been using and this is the outputs that I was showing are from this model. And I think this was a year and a half ago, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood I did not make this model. I am a little bit of a novice in the GIS tools, and these are the people who created this model. It's been very useful for us, and it is available, I believe, and there's a recorded presentation on how they have used it in the state of Minnesota, and if anybody wants help for trying to use it in their state or in their system, then I would be glad to help as much as I can. So I think that's where I'm done, and I'm going to pass it back to Vonceil.
Thank you, Kenny. And next slide, please. So where are we at? We received our certificate of inclusion in the Monarch CCAA in October of 2020. And so, you know, we had all these tools that we had developed, and so we really felt like we had a good start to implementing our program. We did take advantage, of course, of the ramp up period, just because we knew we still had some challenges with lifting within the agency, partly because we are now going through a merger, and which will change probably the face of what ODOT looks like as we merge with the Turnpike Authority and our aeronautics industry, our state aeronautics industry here. So again, the ground is moving beneath us, and so we're kind of having to change our approach. But the other thing, and I kind of call this the BC-19 plan, the before COVID-19. Of course, we were ready to hit the ground and start going out and working individually with our maintenance divisions, and really each division has their own paper records on how they manage their land system. So we were going out and we were going to start talking with them, work on a training program with them. We did manage to make it out to one division to identify areas within their division that we felt like we could implement some of these conservation measures. And then travel restrictions put the boom down the 1st of March. We were not able to get back out. At one point, we couldn't even get into our office to get our materials. And we were not able to get back out until the last week of April. And then we also had other duties. So we were not able to do the monitoring or the outreach that we needed to do within the divisions. We did manage to make it to some of the wildflower plots and some of the larger areas that were on our main arteries within the state, I-40, I-35. And so using kind of a combination of Tier 2 and Tier 3, we developed our own internal tracking form for these areas that we were visiting. We continue to try and do outreach within our organization. We do have a pollinator garden at our state transportation building that managed to kind of keep itself going during the time that we were not allowed back into our offices. We were allowed to finally go out and really hit the ground in June. And so we were able to monitor some of these plots that Kenny showed you in his part of the presentation. So we're continuing the dialogue. We're definitely hoping that we can use this ramp up period to try and catch up with the acres that we did not get done for our portion of the season. And we did supply a partial report to the CCAA on our monitoring efforts. And we're hoping that with Kenny's work, we'd also like to become involved in the rights of way as habitat geospatial database. We're working with the University of Oklahoma to find out the best permissions that we can use to make that happen. So we're going to move forward, and we feel like we'll have a really solid implementation plan that can actually be implemented this season. Next slide, please. And we're not doing this in a vacuum. One of the things that was out of that MOU was the state developed a desire to have a conservation plan. So 40 organizations got together, and since 2016, we have worked with land use managers, universities, the tribal nations, and this month we are getting ready to launch what is Oklahoma Rights of Way publication on best management practices. ODOT, along with some energy sector partners, developed this best management practices document, and that has been shared internally in our agency, and we will be launching that for the general public this month. So we're hoping that as we continue these partnerships, we will move forward and we will have a robust program that will really provide some benefit in the next 5 years. And with that, we'll take any questions. And we really thank you guys for letting us share this information with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vonceil and Kenny. Really good presentation, a lot of good information. And definitely keep us posted when that BMP document is available, because that's definitely the sort of thing we'd want to put in the toolkit and on the resources library. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I can run through. Chris Smith wanted to note that the model that Kenny was referring to and referenced is undergoing some refinement, it looks like, using some additional data from 2021. So he's saying just keep an eye out for updates on that in the future. And exciting to hear about you also having interest in contributing the data to the Rights of Way as Habitat Working Group model. That we also have launched a new web interface for that database, and actually have been trying to do a better job of linking the MJV prioritization model with that database. So maybe that's something we could talk about further. Rick has a question. Does ODOT have plans to reduce the width of mowing and or delay cleanup of mowing to November instead of September?
That is something that we really want to have discussions with our division managers, although with the merger now they're going to be called districts because we're creating a transportation cabinet. But yeah, that is a really good point. I did see when I was out this season, when I was able to go out and do some other, we're doing bald eagle surveys, of course, and we're still working with part of the ABB program. And so, yeah, I did see some delayed cleanup, But in talking with our district division managers, what we're finding out is that actually C19 provided some vegetative opportunities because a lot of the contracts, the mowing and the brush removal contracts, were not able to be fulfilled because people just were not working. And so we're seeing a lot of opportunity where our roadsides were delayed in cleanup or were delayed in mowing. And so that we're really excited to get out on the ground and see what we have now growing within our right-of-ways.
Great. Alyssa is asking about the best practices document. Sounds like they're working on something similar in Wisconsin. So she's particularly interested in seeing what you put together.
Actually, I can get that. I can get a copy to whoever's interested if they want to email me, because it is complete, and we're already doing teasers for it with our Okies for Monarch partners. But I actually have proprietary rights on that document, so I can get you guys a copy.
Excellent. A good inside connection there. Sean is asking about whether anyone has thought about using the University of Minnesota model for utility rights of way. I know there are some other models that were developed for utility rights of way, but does anyone know of any attempts to use the roadside prioritization model on utility rights of way? Oh, Chris, sorry, I see your response. It could be used maybe with some minor modifications. Okay. I see we are at time. We have a lot of congrats and thank yous, Vonceil and Kenny, for your presentation. Again, really informative. We will make this recording available on the case studies portion of the website, and we'll send out a link for that when it's ready. But again, I want to thank you both for your presentation. And if there's other questions, if you don't have Vonceil's contact information, you can email us and we can forward it on to her.
Yeah, and also Kenny's available to help with any of the models, and then definitely Kenny did the heavy lifting on a lot of these numbers and really drilling down into our land system. So either one of us would happily answer any questions.
Okay.
Just a quick response to the energy thing. The model pulls like road layers from federal sources. So if you could insert your own power line layer in for that road layer, then it should work reasonably well.
Okay.
That's all I can offer on that one.
Yeah, that's a good note. Okay, well, excellent. Thank you, everyone. A great meeting, good discussion. We'll get the slides out as well as minutes and the recording for this case study once it's up on the website.